My name is Keith, and these are my stamps. This is episode 5, all about Ajman. We are back in the Middle East on the Persian Gulf. Ajman comes from the Arabic word for foreigner, as apparently Persians lived in the area before, and you can see the red circle where Ajman is, very close to present-day Iran, which of course used to be called Persia. Here's a little closer, and you can see the United Arab Emirates. Ajman, now one of those, the smallest emirate, in fact. It's 260 square kilometres, about 100 square miles, which is about half the size of the Isle of Man for the UK, and 2.5 times as big as Disney World. There are actually 3 parts to the Emirate of Ajman. The largest part is the coastal area. Then there are 2 exclaves, and looking at the map of the United Arab Emirates, the individual emirates kind of have bits and pieces all over the place. The 2 exclaves, the one to the east is Manamah in the foothills of the Hajar Mountains, and Manamah has its own stamp issuing history and will appear later on. To the southeast of Ajman city is Mazfut. It's a small town, but with a larger area in the actual mountains, the Hajar Mountains, not in the foothills like Manamah. Here is a close-up of the coastal area of the emirate, and it's pretty much all taken up with Ajman city, and 95% of the population of the emirate live in Ajman city. As you can see, pretty much urban sprawl, all of it. There is a small area of sandy desert. The history of Ajman follows, for obvious reasons, very closely to that of Abu Dhabi. Despite the name Ajman coming from the word for foreigner related to Persians living in the area, the history seems to begin in the 18th century with the Al Nuaim tribe, a name which will come up later. In 1820, Ajman signed the General Maritime Treaty with Britain. In the 1830s and 1840s, there were several conflicts involving Ajman with neighbouring emirates, Sharjah, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, plus Muscat and Sohar, both of which are now in present-day Oman. All of these ended with the rather grandly named Perpetual Treaty of Peace in 1853, which was a treaty between the coastal sheikdoms or emirates. In 1892, Ajman signed a further treaty linking it even more with Britain. In the early 20th century, there were around about 750 residents, although it was seasonal. The population now is over 580,000, which is more or less the size of Sheffield in the United Kingdom or Baltimore in the United States. In 1952 was the formation of the Trucial States, which you'll remember from the Abu Dhabi episode. And likewise, in 1971, after Britain had said that they were leaving the Gulf, Ajman joined with the other emirates to form the United Arab Emirates. The stamp issuing history of Ajman. In 1963, Britain ceded control of the postal system to the individual trucial states, and many of them took this opportunity to outsource their stamp production. This brought in quite a lot of much needed revenue. As I mentioned earlier in the Abu Dhabi episode, Abu Dhabi didn't do this because they didn't need the revenue. Basically, they already had oil revenue coming in. Ajman, however, didn't and needed to make money pretty much any way they could, and stamp production was one of them. The issues that Ajman released in 1964 and 65 are regarded as legitimate across the board. Those of 1966 and 67 are in some debate in some circles, and most of the issues of 1967 and onwards have been declared non legitimate by at least some people. Those stamps generally were produced to appeal to the thematic collector and didn't really have very much to do with Ajman at all. Um, it's estimated that between 1969 and 1972 inclusive, there were over 6,500 stamps produced with Ajman's name on. And despite Ajman becoming part of the UAE in 1971, and its stamps with its name on being valid through to April of 1972, there are at least 1,000 stamps issued with Ajman's name on in 1973. The legitimacy of these stamps, though, is up for debate. If you look at various philately message sites and message boards, there's some controversy over whether they should be called legitimate or illegitimate, whether other countries have kind of got away with it. And the term dune stamps was coined for Ajman and the other emirates that produced these huge numbers of stamps. And again, it's a term that some people use, other people don't like. But the long and the short of it is, Ajman produced a lot of stamps, whether they were legitimate or not. Before the stamps were produced, the currency in Ajman was the Indian currency, the rupee and the paisa. The Indian government in 1959 decided to replace the Indian rupee with the Gulf rupee. At the time, it was a one for one exchange. And so when the stamps started to be produced by Ajman in 1964, they carried this Gulf rupee currency of 1 rupee being 100 Naya paise. That lasted until 1967 when the Qatari and Dubai Rial took over, with 1 Rial being 100 dirhams. Dirham apparently comes from the Greek drachma. So these are some of my stamps from Ajman. This first picture shows the earliest that I have and the earliest that Ajman actually issued. These were their first set with their name on in 1964, showing Sheikh Rashid bin Humaid Al Naimi. I told you that name would come back. That was the name of the tribe that founded Ajman in the 1700s. Still the same family name ruling. And it shows him with various animals and the Gulf rupee currency, the new paisa, and the 2 rupee stamp at the bottom there. This next set is one of the first that might be labelled problematic. It's from 1967, showing the new currency of dirhams and, just dirhams in this case. It's showing tales from the Arabian Nights, so it does link to Ajman to some degree. But Stanley Gibbons, for instance, doesn't count it as a regular issue and relegates it to their appendix. Some other catalogues do list, although this was one of the first sets that Ajman released as both perforated and imperforated. and some catalogues only list the perf, not the imperf. As time went on, nearly all issues were released for every stamp in three forms: perforated, imperforated, and a souvenir sheet of each individual stamp. This set is generally considered not one to be putting in your lists. It should be in the appendix. It's from 1971, the Phila Tokyo stamp exhibition showing stamps of Japan. Ajman issued a couple of sets for the Phila Tokyo stamp exhibition. This particular one, all of the stamps had a perforated variety, an imperf variety, and a souvenir sheet. In all, from just this one set, there were 35 different items. Here are some souvenir sheets, I guess. There were plenty of stamps released in this small format, and these four sheets were all from 1973, after the time when Ajman stamps, in theory, were valid. They were valid up until April of 1972. These ones show from the top left, Olympics, top right, the Munich Olympics, bottom left, religious paintings of the life of Christ, and bottom right, nude paintings. Not really sure what any of those have to do with Ajman, but as I said before, they were produced for thematic collectors. As such were these two sheets, both from 1972, and sheets of military uniforms. They are both exactly the same, except, of course, for the colour, the green or the yellow. There were also three different issues showing the same stamps but at regular size and regular colour, so a white background and the uniform in their correct colour. Well, I assume their correct colour. All in all, there were 232 items in this particular series for military uniforms. And finally, here's just a few of the Ajman stamps that I still have in my Ajman envelope to sort and catalogue, which takes a long time. I use ohmygosh.on.ca as well as colnect.com, both very helpful for these kinds of stamps. In fact, I use Colnect a lot for looking up different stamps. As you can see here, some are perforated, some imperf. At the top left there, you've got the individual stamp as a little souvenir sheet with simulated perforations. And not very much any of them have got to do with Ajman. Anyhow, my name is Keith, and these are my stamps.